Combating Indian Disinformation, a critical evaluation of Pakistan's response in the May 2025 conflict. In this paper, I have attempted to understand the motives, tactics, and actors in India's information warfare and to analyze Pakistan's disinformation resilience during the conflict. Disinformation has become part and parcel of India's warfare strategy at Pakistan for quite some time. The headlines in front of you are some of the influence operations which have been discovered, which have been actively employed against Pakistan and to discredit Pakistan internationally. The methodology that I've adopted for this paper is that I have again covered the developments which have been analyzed till 30th September. And again, the fact check claims which were part of the preliminary findings is that of 31st May. Again, the fact checks which I've picked for this paper are those which were fact checked by fact checkers which are signatory to the International Fact Checking Network, which is one of the renowned fact checking network in the world. Right now, there is only one Pakistani fact check entity which is signatory to this network, and there are 13 which are signatory to this network as well. Again, fact checkers are not perfect information gatherers and may have missed misinformation and disinformation as part of their coverage of the military conflict. So again, this is the limitation of my paper. And so far, as part of my preliminary analysis, I have documented almost 80 fact checks. The conceptual framework which I have employed for this paper is disinformation resilience, which have been conceptualized by a couple of researchers which were attempting to understand the impact of Russian disinformation on Central and Eastern European countries. According to this framework, there are three indicators which help us to gauge the disinformation resilience of any country. The first is the population exposure. I have modified it to, for Pakistani context. Population exposure to India-led media. And again, it is important to understand what responses Pakistan as a state has evolved over the years to deal with this threat. And lastly, it is an examination of Pakistan's vulnerability to digital warfare. In my paper, I have identified three motives which India utilized this time as part of their information warfare strategy. First was to shape global perception in its favor and discredit Pakistan internationally. Second was to sustain national morale and showcase operational success. And third was to counter what it perceived as Pakistan's lies in misinformation by projecting digital vigilance and transparency. Interestingly, a month after the ceasefire declaration between both countries, Indian Defense Minister in an event said that although the military action has stopped for some time now, but the information warfare continues, uh, and it continues and is still going on. He encouraged this fact that the Indian people should become either social soldiers or first responder in this information warfare against the adversary. And he also said that any Indian unknowingly sharing disinformation perceiving originating from Pakistan will by doing so will become a weapon of the enemy. The tactics which were employed by Indian actors against Pakistan were the psychological operation, which were manifest in the form of manipulated media coverage, social media amplification, and selective fact checking by the Public Information Bureau to maintain domestic unity and influence international opinion. We also observed a lot of usage of AI and deepfakes in the form of fabricated videos attributed to Pakistani military and civilian leaders, and the reuse of foreign conflict footage as well. There was again the disinformation network in the form of the Srivastav group, again, which is then famous for the Indian Chronicles influence operation. Again, a significant component of this influence operation continues to operate and undertake efforts to discredit Pakistan internationally. And Disinfo Lab, which is the copycat version of the EU Disinfo Lab, which is developed which was established in India in order to again perceive as an independent, so-called independent organization. Again, this organogram in front of you point out the various actors which are involved in various information and influence operations against Pakistan. This organogram is based on the publicly available information based on the May 25 conflict and the historical data of the influence operations which were employed against Pakistan. So we can see the Indian Army is involved in such activities. The so-called independent organization, in the form of Sri Vastav Group and Disinfo Lab, are other actors. Similarly, we see this time around that the Public Information Bureau, which comes under the Indian Ministry of Information, was also selectively fact-checking through its fact-check unit. In order to understand Sparks and disinformation resilience, we need to understand the fact that direct Indian TV broadcasts have been banned in Pakistan for quite some time. So again, Pakistan is a very limited opportunity to watch Indian TV for that matter. Indian outlets are generally perceived in Pakistan as propaganda tools, and again, the major exposure to Indian content is primarily through digital channels. When it comes to legal and institutional response to fabricated content, it is largely fragmented and often reactive in nature. The PACA, which is the main legal framework to regulate cybercrimes in the country, lacks specific provisions dealing with false narratives. And Pakistan security policy talks about disinformation, but again lacks any implementation mechanisms whatsoever. As part of my paper, I identified that there was only one government-run disinformation response unit, fact checker. Unfortunately, there are no other initiatives on the part of the government. And again, the interesting thing this time around was there are a lot of Indian fact checking initiatives and entities which are signatory to the International Fact Checking Network actively expose several misinformation and disinformation claims related to Pakistan, which were posted on several social media platforms by Indian users. Pakistanis also encouragingly used humor, citizen engagement, and transparency to disrupt Indian narratives by identifying any propaganda posted on social media platforms by Indians. Interestingly, we will also see that the defense minister, information minister, and foreign minister were readily available to talk to foreign media and present Pakistan's narrative internationally. The armed forces, through ISPR, was also regularly informing the Pakistani audience and international media about the military actions. However, it is important to understand that societal fault lines exploitations remains India's most effective lever, which was also manifested during this conflict, as well as which can be manifested in the future as well. To conclude, India is acting contrary to the spirit or intent of Human Rights Council resolutions 4921 and 5510. There is a clause within these resolutions which identify this fact that no country should sponsor disinformation campaigns either domestically or at international level, and India has been found doing such activities for quite some time. Indian TV news channels continue to thrive on nationalism, noise, and endless debates. It is also important for disinformation researchers to study the impact of Indian disinformation ecosystem on the mental well-being of Indian people. Despite the growing abundance of AI tools, it is important that human expertise, OSINT tools, and careful journalistic verification remains essential. You cannot rely on Grok or other AI tools to fact check certain things. For Pakistan, it's important to adopt a whole of society approach to counter disinformation by combining regulation, technology, public education, and international cooperation. Thank you.